damage dealing weapon. There are no melee skills. Yeah, let's just hop in. We're going to talk a little bit about. I guess we have some preamble to do. So we have the beta next week, obviously, and you're going to see a couple things that are not completely finalized yet. There's going to be some, temporary art, some temporary audio, mostly going through polish, but there's some things that are going to get a little bit more polished than others. So if you've noticed those things during the beta, that's very expected. And we're also going to see some temporary UI art as well. Not the art that we had for the last beta with all the construction man icons. We've kind of got a new set of beta icons that will show off as we get into the professions that do their best to communicate more information about the skills. They're, generic. We're reusing them on each profession, but there's stuff for like, here's a basic melee attack, here's a cone AoE, here's a CC skill, just so that at a glance you can look at your bar and have a better feeling of what these skills should do, and that should hopefully make the beta feel a bit better than the last one, where it was more difficult to figure out exactly what skill was which on the bar. Uh, Taylor, anything to add before we hop into the spears?
I think that pretty much covers it. So we can get started. Take us in game. We'll start with Ranger. Go in order of the spear blocks. Pretty sensible order. As you can see on the UI, these are what the new icons look like. What Cal was talking about, like this will be a cone ability, this is a ranged ability, movement. All the icons have a bit of meaning, so you can like glance down. Like you can't really encapsulate everything a skill does with just like one icon, and so just because it has a movement doesn't mean it won't CC, for example. But it should help you at least get a better idea when just glancing down at your skill bar. So we can just start looking at Ranger. So the first part is the auto attack, which I know everyone got excited about. It's a new mechanic where it will be melee when you're in melee range and then ranged at range. So you can hover over and you can see that when you strike it says that there's a range threshold, and so when you're in the range threshold, it will use these melee skills, but if not, it'll use Bee's Sting, which is a range skill. Um, so you can see I walk up to this golem, 1, 2, 3, melee chaining like that. But if I target this golem over here, I'll throw my spear instead, all by using just the one key. So other than that, pretty simple. Should hopefully feel pretty fluid to use. And so we can move on to the 2 skill. The 2 skill is going to be Mongoose's Frenzy base. You can see from the icon it's going to be more of a cone hitbox. You'll swing in front of it, do some vulnerability in front of you. This is kind of be your bread and butter melee skill, nothing too complicated here. So moving over to the 3 skill, we have Falcon's Stoop. This is going to be like a heavy toss, kind of like ranged maul almost. Definitely want to dodge it. You can see it has that like powerful glow to look out for. It'll do some damage against, immobilized or CC'd enemies. So then we can go to Warclaw's Engage, which is your movement ability. It's going to be a simple kind of like leap at your enemy. So targeted, leap, boom. You can see you got that cool Janthirian Warclaw VFX going on. As for what it does, it's pretty simple. It does damage, and it has like an execute, so if you like whittle them down from range and then jump in, it'll do a bit more damage. So pretty simple skill. Also has a bit of an evade on top of it, as we have like a lot of our leaps have like a defensive component to make it, feel better to engage with. But we can go down to the 5th skill, Panther's Prowl. After you read the blog, this is where it gets a bit interesting. So this will just stealth you and flip over your skills. They all have their own stealth attack version. And so if we go back down the line, we can stealth, and you'll see that it turns into Wolf's Onslaught, where you'll do the swipes again, and then follow up with a wolf, kind of spirit animal as you jab. And then we can go down to the 3rd skill, which becomes Owl's Flight. You'll throw your spear again, but it'll be kind of like encapsulated in an owl spirit. It'll become wider and unblockable and pierce. So pretty good, like in World v World scenarios where there's a lot of enemies, you want to, poke them down at range. Pretty simple there. And so then we get to Predator's Ambush, which for War Claws Engage was basically the same skill, except you're also going to daze. So this is a CC skill. Um, in PvE, if there's Break Bar, that's what you're going to be wanting to use your stealth charges on. If not, you can also engage if you want to, give up some damage for a better CC initiation. You can do that as well. And so the last skill is going to be Spider's Web, which is if you use the 5 again after stealthing, you'll throw out a net fashioned like a spider's web to capture enemies. It'll immobilize on the initial hit, and then it'll persist to cripple people that walk over it. It also gives your pet some super speed, so if you have a melee pet, you're at range, you can throw it out and it'll move them, then they'll run to it. Or if you're a soul beast, it'll help you run to it too. So pretty good, pretty fun. So yeah, that's kind of the concept of the weapon. You have like your melee skill, range skill, initiation. With your auto attack, you're able to just like auto at range, then whittle them down, and then they get low. You could like jump in, do that. And at any point, if you want to empower or to kite away, you can stealth, then re-engage with a more powerful skill. And then I'm already in Untamed, so the Untamed Ambush is kind of like a conal sweep. You just big AoE damage. Yep. So pretty good for again like those AoE cleave, World v World scenarios to just like throw it out. So yeah, it's aimed to be a pretty versatile weapon. You can do a lot with it, whatever you want to do. Power DPS focus, I think covered it. Now I'm kind of rambling. Can you think of anything, Cal, I need to mention about this weapon?
Uh, no, I think you covered it. The stuff,
Let's see if I
Taylor
can
did a
like
lot of work on this weapon, so it's probably broken, as usual.
see
I
kind
don't
of
have a whole lot to add.
awesome. So we can take a look at Necromancer next.
Some people are saying that the cameras are too big too on the gameplay screen.
Okay, I can.
If you want to mess around with that,
They
I
don't
talk
like
on the
looking at
front
us. Like,
curtain. Uh, so as we mentioned in the blog, the Necrospear is supposed to be like a little bit more of an assassin-y type kit, so a little bit more mobility, maybe a little bit more burst than a lot of existing Necro weapons, which we're going to see with the, or we'll probably go in order, so it'll be a little confusing because some of the important skills are on the back half of the bar, but that's fine. We also see some soul shards building up. This is the third hit of the auto attack chain, giving it here.
ooh, I
But these
see.
are generated by all of the skills except for this two slot skill, and these are essentially life stealing. Uh,
Perfect.
I don't know what word I'm looking for. Implements, objects that are consumed by the two skill to lifesteal, and they do increased lifesteal damage against low health targets and increased healing while you're low health. So it can kind of create situations where you're on low health and your enemy's on low health. You should find yourself with the advantage because if you can generate some soul shard, then you'll be able to fire off your two skill, do a decent chunk of damage, also get some good life stealing back. The auto attack also does a little bit of chill here on the end, obviously some life force and create that soul shard. Nothing too crazy. But we can move on to the two skill, which is called Perforate. And this is the skill that consumes all of your active soul shards. So other attacks from your auto or the 3, 4, 5 or your shroud skills, none of those things will consume the shards. So you can build them up to this kind of big moment of power with Perforate, which also does increase damage against low health foes. So that on top of the soul shard execute damage, you can potentially create some pretty big burst with if build up 6 soul shards, Perforate, big damage against low health foes. And we'll see a little bit later in the kit that there are some ways to recharge this skill as well, so that you'll have even more opportunities to set up that burst and go in on low health targets and really punish them. But next we have skill 3. We can talk about skill 3, which is Addle. The meta for skill names this for spears is that one-word names are now in vogue. We're not doing alliteration as much anymore. We want some cool verbs for skill names. So here we have Addle. This is a disruptive skill where it's going to daze your target. It's going to generate some life force. It's going to give you some soul shards. If you strike a target that is using a skill, you're going to get more of all that. So more soul shards, more daze duration, more life force. We're also going to see that if you already have a number of soul shards, this skill will also immobilize. So if you have 4 or more soul shards, pressing this button will guarantee immobilize. You'll still get the daze. You can still get the bonus effect daze against enemy using a skill, but also gives you that mob to set up your final burst with perforate. So potentially a nice little disruptive element. Poured in. Well, we'll talk about that skill right now. We're going to get the teleport on skill 4. This is isolate. This is a ranged throw a spear at your target, and it will mark them. And you can then reactivate the skill to teleport into your target. And the extra hook to this skill does some vuln, does some chill, but it also, if you target an isolated foe, that's the name, but a foe who has no allies around of their own, you're going to get some bonus soul shards when you teleport in. The other nice thing about the teleport here is that it's going to recharge perforate, so you can fire off perforate, act, and then throw isolate, pour it in, recharges perforate, or it's just more of a guarantee that anytime you want to pour it in on somebody, you will have access to your final burst skill with perforate. You'll generate some soul shards. If they're isolated, you'll get a cap of soul shards immediately.
Salve, salve, Viits, meu querido, boa noite. Sim, mano, a nova Spear,
One
né?
nice bonus of this skill as well is that it will recharge itself when you exit Death Shroud.
Parece que vai ser interessante, só que é melee, né? Meio
for a
que
lot
melee.
of fun resets on this kit, where you obviously have the 2 reset by the 4. The 4 is reset by Shroud, so we can see Taylor pressing all his buttons here and potentially, creating some pretty exciting burst combos where you can fire off your 2 skill multiple times in a row, generate some soul shards multiple times in a row, actually leave your Shroud burst in there, and then come back out, have another opportunity to maybe pour it on a new enemy, or go on the same one and recharge your perforate again, and just keep unloading damage. Finally, we have the final skill on the kit, which is Extirpate, and this is a sweeping AoE attack that's going to give you some might and generate some soul shards for each target hit, and it's going to apply a new debuff that is specific to this skill. It's called Extirpation, a very lovely noun version of the word. But the way that this debuff is going to work is that it will negate incoming boons, but it's stack based. So it's kind of similar to Winds of Disenchantment we've seen on Spellbreaker, but that is just as long as you have the debuff, you have the boon debuff. This is a stack based version of that, so it will prevent a number of incoming
Ainda
boons.
não, meu querido, ainda não.
This applies
Já foi o do
say, 3
Ranger,
stacks.
e aí agora
The
tá
next
dando
3
Necro.
boon applications on that target, if you have the
nós vamos
debuff,
seguindo
will be
aí.
negated, and they will just do nothing. So obviously you can power through that if you want to, get a bunch of boons from, especially in like World v World, we feel that this is going to be a little bit less impactful just because there's so many boons that will remove these stacks. But potentially more in PvP situations, you can get that boon rep, get some of that boon negation, and really focus that target down while you're unable to get, prot or regen or whatever. Obviously, this is like a pretty powerful effect. It's something that can be fairly scary. We're going to be keeping a close eye on it during the beta, see if the number of stacks is right, if the full negation is right. Should this end up being similar to what we did with Disenchantment in World v World, where it is just a duration-based adjustment. But we are starting with the most powerful version, and we'll probably see how it plays, see if we need to adjust the number of stacks, or, what we need to do to make sure this mechanic is not oppressive while still feeling impactful. It is a pretty exciting.
Of calling back Guardian. All right, Guardian.
Wow, we have blue icons too.
Yeah, we had a lot of colors with these icons. They're pretty good. So Guardian is a weapon that is going to be kind of a hybrid. It has some supportive elements, but it also has damage capabilities. Kind of calling back to old, maybe World v World Guardian playstyles, where you had like damage-oriented stats, but you also did some support to the group. Is kind of where we're going, like almost like Hammerish. Of Hammer, less CC, but a bit more healing, condition cleanse, that type of deal. So we can start with the auto attack, which a lot of people realized This was what we were talking about when we were talking about a old fan favorite coming back. It has a cone auto attack on it. So that's obviously like the old staff auto. Everyone loved it. And so, pretty basic auto. But it's also going to heal allies in the wave. So this golem is on my team. It's damaged. You can see it's also getting a bit of heals. So just by autoing, you're gonna do some decent damage. Also get some team support. Pretty good. Then we can move on to the 2 skill, Helio Rush. Helio Rush, you're going to charge in a direction and hit enemies. And it will give you Illuminated if you hit an enemy. So Illuminated is Guardian's little mechanic attached to the weapon. Basically, the 2 through 5 all have little bonuses while you're Illuminated, so you want to use your skills in kind of unique ways, almost, to guarantee those little conditions are met so you can get Illuminated and get some value out of it. So Helio Rush is also going to heal enemy or allies you pass through. So if you pass through an enemy and then also get an ally, you'll do pretty well. And then if you use it while illuminated, the heal will be stronger and you'll also gain...
Salve, salve nodatizada, meu querido. Boa noite, mano.
What is this? Resolution.
Vamos aí fazendo um review rapidinho. Tô cortando
and so moving on to the 3 skill, we have a Gleaming Disc.
Né? Só pra ver
It'll spin around and strike enemies, and after a short delay, do a burst that will damage them again. It's also going to give you some might to allies, and if you're illuminated, it's going to grant fury to allies and also blind enemies. You can see there, that was the illuminated version, the basic version, then illuminated. Moving on to the 4 skill is going to be Solar Storm. You're going to throw your spear up in the air, then it's going to break into pieces and crash down. It's going to damage enemies, and it's going to cleanse conditions from allies. So you can throw it up, do a lot of damage, a lot of hits. And so if you get hit by one of your own shards, that is how you illuminate yourself. And if you are illuminated, when using the ability, you'll rain down more shards.
Bonito essa skill, hein?
Fantastic. And so going on to the 5th skill, this is the symbol called Symbol of Luminance. You'll place it on the ground, doing a short CC to everyone you hit with it, and it's going to grant resistance to allies and weakness to enemies that it hits. And then the special part about this is if you are in the symbol, you will be automatically illuminated and then illuminated while you're in the symbol. So you can use all your skills while you're in the symbol. You don't have to worry about those little conditions they had before. They'll all get the illuminated bonus. So you can see, you can use it down. Pretty good art. This is probably the most unique symbol we've ever made. Right?
Bonita.
And you can Art team is crushing it with the spears.
The art team did such an insanely good job with these spears. I'm so excited to use them.
Just wait until we get to Ellie, guys.
Da hora, da hora.
That should pretty much cover the kit for Guardian. What do you think?
On the Guardian,
do you need
to the thief spear mechanic.
Chief
it drew a lot of inspiration from Guild Wars 1 Assassin. For anyone who's familiar with that, the concept of having, Assassin had lead attacks, offhand attacks, offhand attacks, dual attacks. Obviously, the terminology doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you have one spear instead of 2 daggers. So the things are different, but the way that it works is that
salve, Homerzada, meu querido, boa noite, mano.
Show their differentiation immediately.
Salve, salve.
That these 2 skills will kind of share a state, and the default state is the lead attack state. And once you strike an enemy with either of those lead attacks, it will then flip over both slots into the follow-up attacks. Similarly, striking with either follow-up attack state will flip them over into the finishers, and then using a finisher skill will flip them back to the beginning. So it does give some opportunity to kind of mix and match. The 2 slot is primarily focused on damage, and the 3 slot is a little bit more utility focused. There's a little bit of damage, but it's mostly utility. We do see this as potentially more of a hybrid weapon with it's obviously very conditioned focused, but we do want to get the numbers right so that you can play it as a power build too. But most of the damage is going to be coming from the 2-slot combo. And you'll mostly be weaving in the 3 skills when you need more utility, when you need some stealth. We'll get to that when we actually start talking about the skills, but
Tá
more of
bom,
the
vai,
press.
mostra
And obviously
logo,
you
meu
get different
querido.
skills
Para de falar.
that you can still be fairly effective just pressing the 2 skill repeatedly. And that's fine. We're not opposed to that too much. We obviously want you to mix in kind of the full set of skills, but you should have a decent amount of success with the 2 skill. We do have kind of our long-term goal for using kind of this is kind of similar to the
Fizeram
ranger. We
uma
have
coisa legal no
the
Eevee,
hybrid
depois de
auto
usar
attack
aquela
where if you're in
Branded,
melee range, it does a
não lembro
melee
o nome, o
attack. If
player
you're at
vai
range, it
conseguir
does a
mudar de
ranged
elemento
attack.
instantaneamente.
No
Caralho,
attack
roubado,
chain
hein?
here because we're kind of expecting most of the gameplay to be around the 2 and 3 slots anyway. So it is just kind of repeated double slashing spear attack, get some bleeding, get some strike damage. Then we can kind of move on to the 2-slot first. We can look at the 3 skills on 2. We have the initial stab. We have I think it's Mantis Sting. A lot of the skill names here are also drawing inspiration from Guild Wars 1 Assassin skills, so you may recognize some of those. Mantis Sting, pretty straightforward skill, stab, inflict some conditions.
Caralho,
Triple
da hora.
bleeding, that's going to matter for the follow-up skill, Entangling Asp. This is a skill that inflicts poison. If it strikes a movement impaired foe, it's also going to immobilize. You also get the movement impairment from the cripple on Mantis Sting. That's another kind of aspect of the chains here on both 2 and 3, where they have conditional bonuses based off what the previous skill in the chain applies. But there are things that are fairly generic, so that if you're playing Thief, it's not hard to get a movement impairing condition. If you want to start with 3 and then swap to 2, then you can still have access to that immobilize. It just won't be as guaranteed as if you start with Mantis Sting, hit Entangling Asp. Finally, the final skill in the chain here is Falling Spider, and this is kind of the big damage payoff. We see more bleeding, more poison, some vulnerability as well. This is going to do increased damage and increased condition stacks against a foe that is crowd controlled or immobilized. So playing off that both from Entangling Asp or just any CC, obviously Defiant Enemies, this condition is always going to be true. But getting that extra damage for striking a controlled enemy. Let's see. Do I have anything else to talk about?
Vai ser de conge,
I'll
então.
come back to some things at the end. But now we can look at
Conge,
the
mano.
3 slot,
Loucura.
which starts out with Unsuspecting Strike.
Deve ser híbrida, né?
And this
Arma
is a
híbrida.
leap, so this is starting off with the kind of utility-focused aspects of the 3 slot. We have a little bit of mobility here.
Da stealth.
Leap in, deal some damage. This has a high enemy health threshold. This is just a minor callback to the Guild Wars 1 skill, Unsuspecting Strike. But you will deal additional stacks of bleeding as a high health target. But the main value here is if you need to close the gap, then you can always use this skill instead of starting with Mantis Sting. Second skill in the slot here is Vampiric Slash.
Ainda não
This
chegou no
is
Warrior.
a lifesteal. It also inflicts weakness, but primarily a little bit of strike damage and some lifesteal damage, lifesteal healing. This will deal increased lifestealing damage and healing against vulnerable foes, playing off the vulnerability from Unsuspecting Strike. Also inflicts weakness because the final attack in the chain here is Shattering Assault.
São Sed.
This is a Boon Rip. It's also an evade. It's kind of like the pinnacle utility skill, right? We had Falling Spider as the pinnacle of the damage skills. Shattering Assault is like the biggest value utility skill of the kit. We have the evade, the Boon Rip, and it will also enter stealth, which will allow you access to the stealth attack, which we will come back to later. Some of you may already
Essa
caught the
Spear parece que vai
tooltip
ser
when
câncer,
Taylor
hein?
was
Vamos
hovering over
ver.
the auto earlier, but we will come back. So the idea here
Nesse
is
Chief,
that
né?
most of the time you'll be
Descobri.
kind of focused on your 2-2-2 combo, but you'll want to weave in the 3 Shattering Assault to get that stealth attack, and get the payoff that we'll talk about in a couple minutes here. Moving on to the 4 skill, we have Distracting Throw. This is a bit more, there's another range projectile, quick projectile. Throw hits the enemy, inflicts cripple vulnerability, and if it strikes a movement impaired foe, it will inflict daze. So the idea here is if you use it twice in a row, you'll guarantee inflict the cripple, inflict the daze. So you can have
Caralho,
daze
roubado, hein?
or you can have cripple or immobilize
Ô, muito obrigado pelo
shield from
follow aí,
other sources
Pomba
that will make distracting
Wins.
foe
Salve,
much
salve,
more
meu
accessible
querido. Boa
daze.
noite. Boa
But
sexta-feira aí,
the
vamos que
cool
vamos.
thing here is also that we'll see on the stealth attack and the fire skill is that if this follows a finisher skill, so either shattering assault or falling spider, if your skill is distracting throw, it will grant you a bonus to your outgoing damage for a duration, but it's also going to count as a lead attack. So this means you can immediately go into your follow-up attacks. If Taylor has not shown this stuff on the stream yet, he should. I haven't been paying attention, but you can see 2 into 4. Now we already have access to the offhand attacks. Sorry, the follow-up attacks, and then that kind of speeds up your next chain, and you can get to their finishers more rapidly. Next up, almost done, but next up we have Shadow Veil. This is the 5 skill. It's going to be more of that defensive cooldown. There's just a single block that if you block an attack,
Esse é
it will heal
broken.
you.
Essa skill é broken.
And the finisher bonus.
Que isso,
following the
velho?
finisher
Só gasta
skill,
3 de
it'll block a
iniciativa e
couple
você
of
fica
additional
2
attacks.
segundos com
Each
bloco.
of those will also
Você pode
heal
ficar
you. So
bloco
this is
pra
kind of
sempre, é
your
isso?
defensive skill of the kit. If you find yourself in a situation where you're under a decent amount of pressure, maybe you use it
Oxe,
as
olha
your
lá.
finisher follower.
Nunca acaba a iniciativa,
Just
guys.
get that extra healing.
Você pode ficar blocado pra sempre. Que
But
porra é
primarily
essa,
it's going to be
mano?
most effective against like those big single hits, blocking an Earthshaker in PvP, for example. And finally, I guess not quite finally, because we get
Eu achei meio mal pensado isso daí.
but finally we have the stealth attack. This is Ashen Assault. So this is just going to be a multi-stab, rapid, multiple hits, inflicts a bunch of vulnerability. The final hit here is going to do bleeding and poison. And if the skill follows a finisher skill, so notably following
Mas que eles não lançam broco?
Shadow
Verdade.
Assault, which grants you stealth,
Sempre
is
eles
going to
lançam moda,
refund some
caralho. Pois é,
initiative.
mas porra!
The idea here is
Boneco
that
fica
you'll
sempre
get a
pra
decent
sempre
chunk of initiative
blocado
back if you are going through kind of
novidade.
full
Pra matar ele só com um bloco, boa.
potential options, just to make it a little bit easier for
que nega bull em área, não lembro se era
non-dead
de
eyes who
guardião
don't have
de
access
engenheiro.
to
Ainda não vi não,
very powerful initiative granting trait.
Vi
We
que
do
o
want
Negro
this
tem um
spear to
negócio
feel
desse, né?
fairly usable by the other
Necro
people
também
with
tem um negócio
specialization,
desse que
or
você
maybe you don't have
impede o cara de tomar boom.
specialization at all.
É da hora
This
isso daí, é
initiative
uma nova
refund
mecânica
is kind
legal.
of that
Isso eu
payoff
gostei.
to keep the combos flowing, keep the chain going. And this is
Qual
something
classe já
that,
viu?
again,
Vimos Necro,
we've done some internal
Ranger,
testing, but we'll be keeping a close eye on data
Chief e
in
Guardian.
how this ends up flowing, especially for like Daredevil or Spectre.
O Chief
And
tá vendo
making
agora,
sure
né?
that it feels like a fairly fluid sequence
Mano, eu
that we
achei
have enough
bem...
initiative
Esse
in
bagulho do
order to
bloco
use
eu
these skills
achei broken, pra
fairly
ser
often,
sincero.
so that we don't see that
What the
massive
fuck, você pode
disparity
ficar pra
between
sempre block, mano.
Jedi
Eles
and
devem
other
mudar,
specialists
sei
that
lá.
we've seen with some
Não é possível que isso daí vai ficar
inflict
pra
some
sempre, não.
stuff.
Pra próxima, guys. Já mostrou todas as
Feel free to go
skills.
read them.
O Stealth Attack é um
Using
ataque
good.
melhoradinho ali, que
But the tail
de sempre.
is here to fill.
Tá,
Alright.
Warrior agora.
So
Então
Warrior
foi, né? Pelo
Spear
menos vi
is
tudo
going
junto
to
quando
be
trabalhar. Bota fé,
a
Homer.
ranged power damage
Gostei, achei que se
weapon.
empenharam pacas.
It kind of has
Sim,
more
sim,
AoE
sim.
in the kit compared
Tá,
to
tá bem,
rifle.
tá bonita pelo menos as skills, né?
And it has a little mechanic where
Pô, pelo tempo que
kinda
eles
like put a
tiveram
lot
pra
of
fazer,
force
mano, tá
into your
bom.
throws, and
Só
so the
precisa
weapon,
botar aí
like,
uns
splinters,
ícones pra
especially when they're
skill, né?
closer
Que vai
range, they're
fazer
right on
ainda, eu acho
top of
que
you. So we can
não
see
deu
that with
tempo de
the
fazer
auto
as
attack.
artes, né?
It's gonna hit multiple targets when it splinters, and the amount of targets you hit is gonna
Aí
scale
depois é
based
só
on the
balancear.
range you are from them. So they do it from here. You can see scales down eventually.
No, but notably the damage does not change.
Yeah,
based off your range.
notably the damage.
Caralho,
doesn't
que
change.
danão.
And that's true. That's true for all
You
the
see him
spear
hitting
skills,
all
all the
five
warrior
now.
skills, right?
Mano, que auto-ataque forte, velho.
So pretty simple throw that you're gonna do more cleave if you're close up, but you can still hit them from far away for the same amount of damage. And then we can go on to the 2-skill Maiming Spear. You'll throw your spear at a location and then cause a shockwave at the location of your spear.
Nossa, tadinho do rifle,
And
mano.
then the closer you throw it to you, the bigger that shockwave is going to be. So you can see, throw it right here, pretty big. If I do it farther away, it is a smaller shockwave. So pretty good poke damage here. It's going to be kind of the skill you're always pressing. Account for cleave situations. It's especially at closer range, like we mentioned. So moving on to the 3 skill Spear Swipe. This is going to be a more
Caralho, veio de
defensive
frame
skill.
com
You're going to kind of like
knockback
dodge,
e
or
dá dano
you're
ainda.
going to move backwards,
Beleza,
evading, and then
beleza.
follow up with like a swipe of
Skill
wind
de CC
to
que dá
knock
dano.
them
Eles
into
falaram
melee
que ia
even further.
remover isso do jogo, né? Toda skill de CC era pra não dar dano nenhum.
So that's, you know, simple use case, gap opener. Probably useful in competitive modes as well as PvE to help keep yourself at range with the weapon. Then we can move on to the 4 skill, Disrupting Throw. You're going to throw your spear in a line in front of you, immobilizing people, and if they're using a skill when they're struck, they'll be interrupted and dazed for even longer. So it's a really fast projectile, so even if you see someone using it at range, you still have a pretty good chance to interrupt the ability you want, as well as it's immobilized, help you line up things like your 2, or even lock them into the 5, which, you know, pretty good segue into that, is called Spear Marshal's Support. You will mark a target, and then after a short delay, a rain of spears will come down to hit them. It will follow them as they move. Don't have a moving golem there, but, you know, trust me, it'll follow them if they move. And it'll do a small AoE as it follows them. So you can see it like marks them, and
Caralho.
then the rain of spears comes down.
Mano.
So do that, and follow up, or you can even do that first, and then immobilize them by the time it falls. Pretty good. And another cool skill will be your burst skill, Harrier's Toss. You'll jump up and throw your spear at the target location, dealing damage based on your adrenaline level. It is an evade while you're up in the air, so you can throw it. So this being an evade and damage is pretty
Caralho,
good.
tá
You'll
muito
have
broken
2 evades
esses
on the
danos,
kit,
não tão
damage of
não?
3, and then a lot of
Uma boa skill pra
ranged
matar
AoE
Artifício
damage
5?
with that
Sim,
from the
mano.
2.
Mano, claramente os caras
So pretty solid
que
kit
vê tá
for doing
roubado
weapon,
essas coisas.
or for doing damage
Tá roubado as
with the
coisas,
weapon.
não é possível. Sim, tem que ver, né, velho?
And then
Não é
we
possível,
can go
mano.
into the Berserker Burst,
Tá broken.
which in short
Parece
you just kind of go
broken,
crazy
né? Vamos
and
ver.
start throwing spears at people. Exactly what every
Porra, mas os
Berserker
danos tá
wants to
meio
do.
alto, mano.
Unleash a flurry of spears.
A flurry of spears, wild throw,
Wild.
or crazy.
Que double damage
So yeah,
é esse,
that
mano?
covers, you know, all the skills for warrior. Pretty simple weapon. There's not a lot of shenanigans going on, but it's going to be pretty effective at what it wants to do. So hopefully has a more unique
Nossa, porra, vai
niche
ficar
in
broken
Warrior's
Warrior,
toolkit,
mano.
and people
Que
have fun
isso?
using it.
Looks pretty sweet. But you're not done talking yet, because next we're covering the
Yep.
engineer.
Swap
I guess
over
you should
to
switch back.
rod-based weapon. You're gonna be handling a lot of electricity. It is going to be definitely a melee weapon. Has a decent condition focus, but it kind of like Thief's Spear,
Melee?
it also has like hopefully decent power numbers on it. So if you really want to play power Spear NG, it should be, you know, it should be pretty decent. Something we'll definitely look into to see the viability of both. But it does lean more into the condition role as a condition melee
Partiu
weapon.
comprar solto pra New
So
Meta.
you can start with the auto attack.
O
Just
Ing achei bem massa.
simple 1, 2,
Vamos ver,
3.
vamos ver.
Does some conditions as you go.
É milizão, né?
But
Milizão
you
já
can
dá
see here
aquela
it mentions
pegada.
focused, which is part of the 2.
Aí é melee
The
mesmo,
2
né?
is going to be a dash
130 de range, fi.
normally, and if you have a target in range, you'll dash and strike. And you can see it'll apply that buff to them, which means your target is focused. And all your abilities do additional things to focused
Ó,
enemies.
roubada essa mecânica, hein?
So if I focus this golem and then start auto attacking it, you'll notice I now apply vulnerability as well as part of my melee chain. So better cover Condi and just some vulnerability access, pretty good. I don't have a killable golem right now, but this ability comes as a fun when you like has a reset when you kill someone with it. So in the open world, when there's a lot of enemies and the AOE is better, you know, you can kill someone, move on to
Destaca
the
a
next,
vulnerabilidade pra sim, sim.
and keep going like that. This
Pressão
weapon
minha, o
has
Conde vem
a
forte. Então, tem
decent
algumas
amount of
classes que
AoE
não são
abilities on
Conde
it.
não,
It
Inson.
has a theme of like having a
Tipo,
lot
o
of AoE,
Guardian
but
pareceu
also
ser
focused on
full
one person.
power.
So here you can see that I use the lightning rod. So it's
O
a
Ranger
two-part
também é
ability.
power.
The first part you're going to just like
Então,
prime
tem
your
algumas
lightning
classes
rod,
que são
damaging
power
nearby
e outras
enemies.
que são Conde.
It's going
E
to
outras
apply
que são meio
vulnerability
híbrida, pelo que
to
tá
people,
parecendo.
and then if your target is focused, it's going to apply even more vulnerability. And you're also going to build up charges for each target struck. So if I go here, and do that, you can see I'm building up vulnerability, more on this guy than the others. But I have 12 stacks of it that's basically fully charged, so I can reactivate to throw the lightning rod, and that's going to do more damage, or more burning and vulnerability based on how many charges you had, and it's going to deal more raw power damage to your focus target. So do that, charge up, and then eventually you can throw it for some damage.
O dano
And
disso
it's
daí
really
tá
cool
bem
'cause you
mais
can turn on
balanceado,
the
mas é
lightning
porque ele não
rod
tá
and
com
then
amuleto
swap
de
into a
Conde
kit,
também, né?
and then use that abilities there while it's charging. You have to sit in your spear,
Vou
and you can
mostrar.
come back to it charged, and then use it like that.
Boa noite,
There you
essas
go.
Spears. Salve, salve, Potatão, meu querido. Boa noite, mano.
So the 4 skill will be
Isso aí com
Roiling
Scrapper
Strikes.
de
This is your
rolo.
CC ability, kind of like
Pois é.
it's kind of like a
24 de
conal
Vune Rapidex,
CC.
pois é, mano.
You'll smack down,
Tão boa, tão meh.
kind of
Então
electrify
parece
the
tão
earth.
roubada,
It's gonna
Potat, em
break up.
algumas classes.
And you're going to
Principalmente
stun
a
people,
gente
and
viu
if
que o
your target
Warrior
is
tá
focused,
muito
it's going
forte.
to
Pareceu.
kind of like do a launch instead. So a bit better CC.
Ranger também tá
So
interessante.
this is like
Que
kind of like
todas
your
as
engage,
skills
you
tem
can
um
somebody
stealth
do that,
ataque.
you can jump in,
Skill 2, 3,
do
4,
all
5,
your
tudo
stuff.
tem stealth
Pretty cool
ataque,
looking
ou seja,
ability.
elas se melhoram quando você tá no stealth.
You know, if you see a group of enemies, you can get a pretty big CC like that. And then we can go on to the 5 skill, the Devastator, where you're going to kind of leap at your enemies and then unleash lightning around you. Do it right here. It's a big lightning bolt.
Os números me emocionam
Big
muito.
damage.
Porque vem... Então, mano. E depois vem nerfar. Então, tá.
And
Tipo,
if
tem
your
uns números
target
que tão
is
meio escroto.
focused
Tipo, o
and
da
they get
lança
hit by
do
this,
Warrior
you'll
tava
kinda, like,
escroto, mano.
mark them for even
Tava
more
batendo
lightning
12,
strikes.
15k skill
That,
nos golem, tá ligado?
you can see they get progressively hit more. Does pretty good burning damage. So this is going to do a lot of damage if you can manage to hit it on your focus target, and also just pretty good naturally if you hit anyone with it. So that's kind of like the gist of the weapon. It's not too complicated. It does a lot of AoE damage. You want to get in there, hit people, and also focus the one target you want to take down, and make sure all your abilities hit on them.
Ah, mas ficou legal. As
Am I
animações tão
missing anything
bonitas,
talented
pelo
that
menos.
needs to be talked about the
As
AoE
skills
weapon?
tão legal, velho.
I don't think so. It's like a. Dang, I didn't think of a funny pun that I could use for this one. Yeah, I
It's
think
shocking.
I don't know if it's
Right?
shocking.
Right? Oh, okay. Never mind.
Maybe a charged discussion.
Eu lembro do catalyst do beta que o Bench era
I'm gonna keep
60k, veio
using the
nerfado por
skill to
46,
show off, like,
caralho.
how amazing
Caralho,
our
nerfou
team
hard.
is.
That's very impressive. Big
Tá
shout
lá,
out to the
da
art
hora
team.
as skills.
Shout out to all the teams.
Shout out to
I was
all the
gonna do
teams that
this
work
part,
on
but I
spears,
forgot.
yeah.
Like, it's actually crazy. All the teams that help with spears. Like, obviously Taylor and I are here talking. There's obviously other designers on
Porra,
the
é
combat
bonito.
team that worked on
O
these.
design
The
das
VFX
skills tá
team,
da hora,
UI
mano.
team, engineering
Fizeram um bom
team.
trabalho.
The editing team put up with all my outrageous names that we'll get to on Elementalist, so thank you so much, editing team. But obviously, you know, production team keeping us on track. Couldn't do it without them. There's a lot goes into making games, guys, and it's not always obvious. But there's a lot of people you'll never hear of, or never see that we couldn't do it without.
As skills tão lindas
Let's see if I,
demais, é.
I'll try to remember to say
Skills
that again at the
bonitas,
end,
porque os
otherwise
caras só
everyone's
tão
gonna
lançando
we
uma
just
arma no
buried that in the
inteiro
middle,
assim.
like dead in the middle of
Pelo
the
menos
side
isso, né?
stream. We shout out everyone else. But we'll be back next OBS probably if not. too late.
Revenante agora.
But moving on to the Revenant, we'll see. It's kind of a torment-focused weapon that also has some decent strike damage. It's kind of a mid-rangey, you know, like 600 range at the moment. We might want to make that a little bit longer, just so it feels a little bit more like a true ranged weapon, probably in like the 900 range. But we wanted to see how it plays as kind of like that mid-rangey 600 range option. We can see similar stuff on the auto attack where we have the hybrid melee slash ranged auto attack depending on your range.
Se tu
Nothing
comparar
too
com as
crazy.
elites
We
que
see
eles
some
tinham que
torment.
lançar a animação da arma nova
I guess you
mais
should start with
todos
the
os
5
dias.
actually.
Pois é,
This
sim,
skill
verdade.
does reduce the
Não, tá
cooldown
bem,
of
tá bem
Abyssal
mais
Raise. So
tranquilo,
let's
né?
Abyssal Raise. If you guys read the blog, you're probably pretty familiar with this, but let's talk about it again. Abyssal Raise is the premier damaging component of this kit is that it is, ground targeted AoE,
E
blast
outra
finisher,
arma de conde, hein?
deal
Pelo
some
jeito.
torment, deal some damage, but it's a thing that kind of stacks up the more you use it. So a lot of the skills on this weapon are centered around making sure you can press Abyssal Raise more often. So you see you get stacks of Crushing Abyss. You can get up to 2 stacks per use. So if you hit 5 targets, you'll only get 2 stacks. Stacks up to a maximum number of 5. We didn't want you to get 5 stacks immediately because it's probably a bit too powerful. But you'll see, get 2 stacks, and then the 5th stack. So maybe you need 3 hits to get there, maybe you need 5 hits to get there. But the more stacks you have, the more strike damage you'll get from the skill, the more torment you'll get from the skill. And then we'll see basically every other skill in the weapon gives some amount of cooldown reduction to Abyssal Raise. So the idea is that you have a bunch of charges initially, or a few charges initially.
Caralho, roubado, hein?
Spend those, build up some stacks,
Vai ser damage dealer
then
também.
get some resets, and then you're kind of at the empowered version at that point. Not quite at full power on your 3rd use, but 3rd use is pretty strong if you have 4 stacks, and then you're going to be at full power every time you get these
Meu Deus, eu tenho a
resets.
impressão que eles
you get
gastaram
another
80% do
powerful
tempo no
ground
virtuoso e o
target
resto
skill.
dos 20 nas outras 8
So now we
classes
can go
fazendo as
back. Let's go
animações,
back to
cara.
skill 2, Abyssal Force. This is a enemy targeted
Não duvido.
AoE, so throw it at whatever the enemy is. You need line of sight, so
Porque é
no
mesmo,
concern
as
with throwing it
animação do
behind
virtuoso
walls
é
or anything
bonita
like
pra
that.
caralho.
But this will give you a pretty good chunk of recharge on Abyssal Raise. Also inflict Torment and Chilled as well, so get some synergy with the Torment, that Chill inflicts Torment trait. I'll see a decent amount of Chill on this weapon as well to kind of tie into those Condi builds. But, pretty straightforward, low cooldown, bread and butter DPS skill that also recharges Abyssal Raise a decent amount. Next up on the 3, we have Abyssal Blitz. This is a little quick dash. Gives yourself.
Nossa, essa skill ficou
it's one of the
maneiraça, hein, mano?
short distance evade skills, most valuable as evading a powerful attack. It also leaves some of these, what are we calling these specifically? Blitz mines
bonita,
on the ground. So as you run, you drop some mines on the ground. These will trigger as enemies run over them, or if they spawn on an enemy, you're going to get that trigger immediately. Inflict some slow, inflict some chill. Reduces the cooldown of Abyssal Raise. So, obviously very good if something is chasing you. You dash away from them, put some mines on the ground, slows them down, chills them, lets you get escape, reposition a bit better, and
Tem
then
que ser roubado, né?
continue the fight.
Senão ninguém compra.
Up next, we have Abyssal Blot. So this is another ground target AoE. It's intended to be a bit more of that CC skill. So we'll
Olha, essa daí também ficou maneira, hein?
Start on the ground, deal
Caralho.
some initial strikes, and then the final strike there is going to be inflict chill and do a pull all the enemies toward the center. It's also a dark field, so if you want to combo Abyssal Raise, get that
Ó, que
blast in
skill
there,
bonita também,
you
mano.
totally can.
Porra, eles
But again,
acertaram a
this is
mão,
going
hein?
to be
Só
recharging
que será que não vai ficar muito
Abyssal Raise
efeito na hora
cooldown
das
for each
fights?
target you strike,
Será que não vai
or
virar
attempt
muito
to strike
putaria?
on the final hit of the pull. The number of enemies in the area at the time is going to give you more Abyssal Raise cooldown reduction. We already talked about the 5, so there we go. Obviously, this is kind of intended to be more like that ramping up. And, as you're fighting a 1v1, it's going to ramp up a little bit slower than if you're fighting a large number of enemies. But once you get up to that maximum potential, that's when you're really going to be able to unleash potentially a ton of damage, right? Because you have max stacks, fire off an Abyssal Raise, get some cooldown reduction, fire off another Abyssal Raise, maybe use the rest of your skills, maybe you can fire off another Abyssal Raise after that. And that's a large number of Abyssal Raises that are going to, I guess, raise all of your enemies with Torment and Strike damage.
A única classe que não ficou ultra quebrada foi
quite powerful.
Sim.
Yeah, I think
Todas
this
as
little
tiveram
note
fase
you
God de
can
morte.
see on stream. I've
True.
been trying to show it off. As you get stacks of the Crushing Abyss, you get a little aura on yourself that kind of grow up. and then on the 5th stack you kind of become pretty demonic, filled
Caralho,
with
ficou
abyss
muito
energy,
maneiro.
I guess we're going with. And so it makes it pretty obvious if you're just looking at a Revenant as well, like they're fully charged up, they're gonna hurt. So pretty, and it also just looks really cool. That's like the main part. It just looks really cool.
It all looks awesome.
Yeah.
These mines are very
Ficou
threatening,
foda,
I
tá?
would say. I don't want to run into them.
Acho que um dos mais bonitos, as skills mais bonitas ficou do Revenant, mano.
But I
Gostei
think
pra
that's
caralho.
everything for Rev. Is there anything else you want to call out, Taylor?
No, I think that covers.
All right, then we can move into Mesmer. 2 professions, 1 time. Oh, good job.
Yep.
Então vamos pro Mesmer agora.
So Mesmer Spear is a 2-handed melee power weapon, which, you know, it's kind of weird that Mesmer doesn't have that niche filled already. And this is the first weapon.
Acabando já,
I'm pretty
guys.
excited this is gonna be it. It's gonna feel pretty good to play. So
Só
we just
falta
go
mais 2 ou
skill by
3.
skill. The auto attack simple 1, 2,
Mais
3.
trabalhar que achei foi do L. Vamos ver,
Build up
vamos
some
ver.
might,
Deve ser a
weaken on the
última, né?
last hit. Kind of siphon your enemy's strength going on. But that's not
Eles
really
deixaram
interesting.
tudo
Who cares
roubado
about the
pelo
auto?
hype, né? Não
The
sei.
cool skill
Pois é, capaz. É
Mind the
pra
Gap,
vender
which
mais também, né,
might
Homer?
have surpassed
Você tem que
Gorman
vender um
Dies
pouco,
as
né?
my
Tem que
favorite,
aproveitar o hype e
skill
fazer
name.
vender também.
There are 2 types of
De
people.
boa, mano.
One that
Mas entende.
hate Mind the Gap and want me to change it. They're like, this is the worst placeholder name. And then I got message from so many people being like, this is my favorite. You can't change this. So we're minding the gap here. But basically, you're going to do an AoE around you, and you can think of it as like 2 circles, an inner circle and an outer circle, and you're going to want to hit people with the outer circle around it. Because if you do, you'll gain clarity, which will augment
roubado, sim.
your 2 through 5 skills to have
Foi
better
o
effects.
Foi o que saiu menos roubado.
So there we go, that's what it looks like.
E
And
ainda
then
era
you
bem
can see you have
quebrado.
this
Sim,
little
mano. Nossa,
eye
eu
floating
lembro.
above you to signify that you have clarity. And for those wondering, I saw after the preview there were a lot of like questions about it. So the outer circle does take priority from the inner circle. So if there is, say, someone that's like straddling the line, they'd get hit by both the outer and inner hitbox of it. You'll get clarity; it'll count for the outer. And there are a lot of bosses in the game that like their hitbox is so big that if you are standing right next to them and use this, you'll hit them anyways. But for the smaller hitboxes, it's a pretty good game to make sure you keep spacing.
Achei
So
legal
you
esse
can get
lance de eles
clarity,
trazerem as
which we can
mecânicas
see.
inéditas
So for
pro
Mind the
jogo,
Gap,
curti.
if you
Sim,
use
sim,
it
isso
while
daí
you
foi
already
bom.
have clarity, it'll
Sempre bom
give you
coisa
clarity
nova,
again
mano.
and to give you some might.
Era
So
tanto
little
usando
might stacking
ele
for
fez
open
boneco
world.
fazer
We
easy
don't really want clarity to be
Broken,
like
mano.
used on the one that gives you clarity, just kind of a consolation bonus here. And minor thing, this like spawns a clone for you. This is your clone gen, as you know a lot of 2 skills do.
Olha os números dessa
and you
skill,
all can
guys.
read, I
Olha aí
believe
os
in you.
números. Quase 2k de dano bruto,
So we
mano.
go on to the 3
Cê é
skill,
louco.
Imaginary Inversion. This is
Ó,
gonna be
outra
your
de quase
defensive
2k de
skill.
dano bruto,
You're gonna
2k e meio
evade
de
and then
cura.
do a strike. And then the little
Ainda dá
tweak here
blur.
is if you
Meu
evade an attack with
E ainda
the
remove
strike
conde,
and
meu
then hit
Deus.
someone, you
10
will
segundos
heal.
de cooldown.
So you're just gonna
O
kind of
quê?
spin around, do
Mano,
that.
isso daí não faz sentido não, mano. Que porra
I
é
don't
essa?
have the golems really attacking me.
Que skill
but if I was to
broken.
evade and be hurt, it would heal me. So kind of like incentivizing to correctly time this as a defensive, not just throw it out for damage. And then if you have clarity while using the skill, you will cleanse
Acho que
conditions.
pode ser por causa das armas
Giving
antigas
cleanse
depois
kind of
pá.
something
Sim,
that
sim, mano.
Mesmer
Sim.
doesn't have a lot
Já
of
mostrou
in
no
its
L?
weapons,
Não,
so
não,
Torch
ainda não.
exists. So giving DPS Mesmer
Ranger
with a
Mesmer,
cleanse
que
condition,
orgulho.
while pretty niche, would be, you know, pretty good for the times it is good.
Enfim, foi abençoado amém.
Skill is not rooted, by the way. You
Aí
can move while
gosta, hein,
using it.
Nodate.
And then we can go on to the 4 skill, Phantasmal Lancer. This is your Phantasm, obviously. It's also a movement skill. You kind of saw it in the trailer. You're going to dash to your foe and boon rip from them if you hit them, and then you'll leave at your initial starting location a
Torce
Phantasm
pra
will
eles não
spawn
nerfar,
after
né?
delay and then kind of dash through you to deal damage, crippling people. See there. Kind of move. So it gets pretty fun when you have clarity because you'll spawn 2 phantasms instead, and 2 is a bigger number than 1, so that's obviously better. And so you'll spawn at like an X formation and kind of like dash through. It's pretty visually cool. It also has
Vai
another,
tá
'cause
roubadinha
why
também,
not?
viu? Vai tá roubadinha também.
So they'll
Pode
cripple your
preparar.
target, but if your target is already crippled, it'll immobilize them.
Vai ser
So pretty
o
good
Spear
setup.
of War,
So
Spear
you can
Wars
do that,
2,
do
o
that,
game aí.
and then it'll immobilize them, so help set you up for another outer edge hit.
Ranqueada só vai ter nego jogando de Spear, fi.
And then we go on to the 5, Mental Collapse. That's as
Nerf
close
buff
to
deles
Mental
são sempre
Boom
uma
as I could
surpresa à
get for
parte.
editing. So
Altos
it
cleans,
is a
pois é, mano.
teleport, and then you like
Muito
slam the
cleanse, muito
ground and kind of do
dano.
an explosion.
Gera bastante clone.
That will do 3 strikes of damage, and then if you are empowered
Olha,
or
um
have
combo
clarity,
finisher.
it will stun as well. So that's pretty good CC for
Stun. E
PvE.
dá dano.
And
Outra
obviously
skill
a
de
pretty
stun
good
que dá
engage
dano.
tool for competitive modes.
Ah, Arena Net, Arena Net.
And then to make it even better and help rotations flow pretty well, this skill will also, you know, like we love our capstone 5 skills to do, reset your 2 skills so you can combo it pretty easily. So you can do that, and then 5, and then do that again. Perfect, yay.
Isso vai ser bem
So that
diferente,
pretty
porque
much
todas as classes com a
covers
mesma arma.
the
Pois
base
é.
toolkit of it.
Pior que vai ser
It's
Spear
all
Wars
about
mesmo.
getting
Sim,
clarity
mano.
or opening your
A
sharding
mecânica
gun,
muda
whatever you want to
bastante.
say.
Sim,
Has
sim.
a nice defensive
Pelo menos
tool,
isso, né?
lots of
A gente
mobility
sabe que
to
a
be kind of a melee assassin deal
virar
for
puro suco
competitive
de,
modes.
da bosta nos primeiros 6 meses.
And a lot
Pois
of
é.
AoE cleave damage. That
Vamos
was like
liberar o uso
main
dessas
goal for
armas
this
só pra quem
weapon
tem
is
XP,
AoE
não, né?
cleave. But I can also show
É
the
só pra
ambush
quem tem XP,
as a
né?
mirage.
Se for PvP vai ficar
It's
complicado.
going to stab in front of you.
É só pra quem tem XP,
Just
mano.
be more of a DPS cleave tool because we can never
É
have
pra isso mesmo, é
enough
pra vender
damage.
mais expansão.
Is called
Se não
Fractured
tiver, vai ter
Glass.
que jogar nerfado sem a
Kinda
Spear.
like glass mirage shards stabbing with your spear in front of you. And then
Ia ser legal
so
se todos
the
fossem melee, o
Mirage
fight damage
Mantle
ia ser
trait
legal.
will cause you to gain sharpened edges when using this skill, which is a damage multiplier buff. This is kind of another balancing tool we can use for Power Mirage. Part of the reason in PvE is that, you know, the base Mirage trait line just doesn't already have like a lot of just pure damage multipliers. So this is another way that we can, you know, give Power Mirage more damage in PvE. So it'll use it,
Primeiro
provide
dia
a
todo
buff.
mundo usando.
Currently provides like
Sim,
10
certeza.
seconds, but you can
Noite,
stack the
salve,
buff
salve,
up
Holy
some
Shot,
more,
meu querido, boa
every
noite.
time you use it, so to give you time to like swap to other weapons.
Boa sexta-feira aí, vamos que vamos.
You know, spear always,
Não
but
sei
you
de
do want to
achando
make
que
sure
eles
you're
iam
like back
lançar
in
pra
the
quem não
spear
tem
to,
Spear.
you know, keep that damage multiplier up. Yeah, that should mostly cover spear, based around positioning with high damage, mobility, pretty fun.
Todas as armas parece que tá bem forte,
Anything-
guys.
Anything else?
Estão bem
to count?
bonitas, pelo menos as
Can we press
animação.
2 and 5 some more? 'Cause they look
Parece que
awesome.
tá valendo a pena
The-
comprar essa expansão,
it's
pelo
just
menos
so
agora no
crazy,
começo, né?
like how cool this
Se quer
looks.
ficar mais forte que a galera, né?
Yeah, that's awesome. Great stuff.
Olha que bonita, mano. As skillzinhas tá bonita
Yeah,
mesmo.
I guess we could talk about Ellie. Do we have
Já mostrou todas.
Hey,
Vamos pro
can-
Element agora.
the
Element,
spear,
guys, meu
the
preferido.
long-ranged glass
Lá.
cannon damage-dealing weapon that is not a
Que é o Spear de
longbow,
graça
but
vai
hopefully
ajudar.
it is a reasonable replacement.
Sempre comprei de 75
for everyone
dólares,
who
mas
is
acho que
looking for
nesse
this
ano eu vou
style
na
of
de 25
gameplay.
dólares. Carai,
So let's start. Let's just
cheguei a
start in fire.
expansão.
Why
Porra,
not?
aí sim, hein,
Where should
Homerzada.
we start? We just start with the auto attack. Let's just start with the auto attack. Flame spear.
Nossa, o Element
Throw a
são
spear
4
at your
elementos pra
target.
mostrar as skills, né?
Yay.
Great.
São 20
Alright,
skills
moving on.
diferentes.
Skill 2, we have Blazing Mirage. This is a ground targeted and use the cool jump animation. It's not an evade, but it doesn't lock your animation
O Element
watch the
foi o que
character
mais
like
ganhou,
Warrior
né,
One does,
dessa expansão, pô.
because it's not an evade. So, you know, trade-offs, whatever you want to say.
Também comprei de
this one,
75 de novo e
AoE,
grau.
explosion,
Aí sim, Léo.
burning damage, all the
Ganhei
good
de
stuff.
aniversário, boa,
It's
boa.
1200 range, by the way.
Achei que a Spear ia
It's
ser ranged no
not
Mesmer.
obvious.
Pois
But
é, pois é,
next
pois
up,
é.
we
Fazia
have
mais sentido, né? A
speed.
Dagger, no, a
So this
Dagger é
is
ranged e a
something we
Spear
talked a little about in the
é
blog. All
melee
the
no
3
Mesmer,
skills
doideira.
in all the attunements
Mas é porque
have
a última
kind
arma
of
já foi o
two
rifle, né?
different
Que já era
components. They have
ranged.
a small buff that they give to yourself or some utility value that they give to yourself. And then they also empower your next spear skill in some way. So Seeth gives you might, gives you fury. You are seething, so you know you're more powerful in some way. And then also your next spear skill will deal increased damage. And importantly, this one and the
Skill
air
5
one,
muito
which gives
escandalosa,
guaranteed
pô.
crit strikes. We'll get to that later. But these affect
Legenda
all
BW, né?
strikes of the
Pensei nisso
skill,
aí
not
mesmo.
just your next skill,
Serve
whereas
no
the
mínimo.
earth skill that we talked about in the blog, which gives days as a bonus, is obviously just the next strike because it would be way too powerful
Nem
if
pensei
a
ruim de
multi-hit
crash e
skill
sai
could
logo.
daze you a bunch of times. But here we're
No
going to
Ranger
see
de novo, melee
this
só
plays
tem
very
esse
nice with
range.
the volcano that we'll get to because volcano strikes a bunch
Cara,
of times. We want to make sure
é
this
verdade,
bonus
na verdade.
actually rewards
Cara,
that.
pior que
So
PC
it is
bom
going
não
to
muda
affect
nada.
all strikes from your next skill. And this is only consumed by spear skills specifically. No shenanigans with like, I don't know, Glyph of Storms or something to
Meu
get
nunca
more damage
crash,
there. It will only be consumed by and only
PC razoável de ficar sem
grant
DPS porque
bonuses
escuta
to
nego junto.
the
É a vida.
spear
Pô, tá
skills.
melhor que o meu, mano. O meu é tenso.
So next up, skill 4, we have Meteor.
O meu não aguenta, não.
There's just one meteor. It's not a shower of meteors. It's just one meteor. Conjure a meteor at the target location. And this is the slot 4s that we talked about during the blog as well, where all of them have kind of this inner radius that rewards you for targeting the skill well. It is going to give you some sort of bonus. In this case, it gives you increased damage. Notably, these skills currently cannot be
Que horas começou
retargeted.
essa live? Não era às
That
4?
makes it a little bit too free
Eu
to get
acho
the
que
inner
era,
circle
Potato.
bonuses. We'll
Foi
see
às
some
4 que
strong ones. Obviously,
começou, eu
increased
acho.
damage is good. The float
Nem trintinha
that we
faz
talked about in the
da
blog that we'll get
BW.
to as well.
Mano, já trava aí,
So
Holy
you'll actually have
Shot.
to aim
Não é
these
por
very
aí.
well, or aim these effectively.
Nunca reparei, mas não nota
Obviously,
lag da
if you
BW.
don't get the inner
porque
circle
eu
bonus,
uso
you
tudo no
still get
high.
a good chunk of damage
Pô,
here.
aí
You
é
still get some
nice.
damage on the other skills, but you won't get that guaranteed bonus if you are able to hold your mouse on top of your target. And then finally, we have the 5-slot skills. We're going to see a lot of patterns in the attunements, and this is trying to kind of simplify the feeling of the kit a little, or the weapon a bit. Kind of what we see with Firebrand tomes, where a lot of them have similar styles of
Porra!
skills on the same button, just so that when you go into a new tome or when you go into a new attunement, you kind of have a general sense of what those skills are going to do and try to give kind of
Pô, ficou
not
bonito,
a
hein?
completely linear feel to the weapon, but a more straightforward understanding of how the weapon works. So with that said, we can talk about the first etching skill, and this is etching volcano. And the first thing I'm going to say about this is that there will be LOD effects, level of detail effects, for everyone except for the elementalist. The final versions of these are still being worked on, so for the beta, these will all just show a combo ring to enemies and also your allies. You'll see the fire field, while the elementalists themselves will see this super cool ground etching. So the idea behind these skills, how they work, the etching itself creates a large area that gives you some personal benefit, doesn't affect allies, but a small personal benefit. And then as you use skills inside the spell circle, that kind of charges up the spell circle. So we see when you first drop it, you have access to the initial flip over, in this case, the lesser volcano, which you can fire off in a pinch if you need to, but this will be
Caralho, que da hora, mano.
in this case it'll last for less time, so it'll fire off less eruption damaging areas and do less damage overall. But once you get the spell circle fully charged, we can see the V effect. Visual effect also charges up as you use skills. It looks super cool. But once you get to that full power, you can unleash the ultimate, in this case volcano. Lasts a bit longer, fires out a bunch of missiles, deals a bunch of damage. And that's the gist of it.
Mas não vai usar, não vai ativar pra gente
We'll
ver?
get to the other attunements, obviously, as well. They're all kind of in this similar vein, with a lesser version and a full version. And they all have kind of different flavors.
Aí, ó.
Personal
Caralho,
healing, some NCC,
foda,
we'll see some
foda.
debilitating conditions as we get to the other attunements.
Foda, mano.
But fundamentally, all the attunements kind of have this same mechanic tied to
Caralho.
them. So typically you'll come into the attunement,
Nossa,
drop the
imagina
etching on
isso
the
daí no
ground,
Capricórnio,
press
fi.
2, 3, 4 if you want to, ending with a 3 here specifically so that your volcano deals more damage.
Porra, isso daí no Capricórnio
But
lá, mano.
these
Todo
also
mundo lá
charge
em
up
cima
from any skill
sambando no
usage.
Bel,
So
você
if you
só
do
joga o
have, say,
bagulho.
Arcane Blast on your bar, that'll
Todo
give
mundo
you a charge for
queimando,
the
fi.
etching, or if you want to use auto attacks, that'll
Maluco,
give you a charge
roubado.
on the etching. It's pretty easy
Achei que
to
ficou
charge these up,
muito
honestly.
trabalhado no ar,
We
não
didn't
ficou
want it to
essas
feel
coisas assim, verdade.
too
Não, não, do
difficult, make it
Element
too
tá
clunky,
bonita, hein?
so that's something we'll be keeping a close eye
A
on
do
during the
ar
beta.
ficou forte, mas não tá
Is
bonita,
making sure
não tá
that
tão bonita, né?
it's not completely free, but
Oxi,
we
isso aí
do
vai ter
want
pra
to
visão de tudo
have
de cima.
fairly easy access to the
As do Eng,
full
Guardian
power
e L
version of
ficaram
these
bem
skills.
macias, na minha opinião. Sim, sim. Mano, olha essa skill, velho. Muito foda.
Alright, should we move on to water, or are you still
Isso daí
filling
lá,
off?
no,
Think
You're
lá
already
em
in water.
Capricórnio, fi, vai
We're already in water.
destruir
Moving
tudo
on.
e todos.
Alright, so water, we have the restorative spear. Pretty straightforward. Throw a spear. If it hits someone, you heal yourself a little bit. 1200 range, though. So we'll see a common theme. I'm just
Baixar
gonna
o
keep
brilho
saying
do monitor
1200
pra
range,
você não
1200
levar blind
range,
na vida
because it's
real.
1200
É
range.
true.
But we can move on to skill 2, which is the X beam. So this is kind of a different flavor of
Nossa, inicialmente só
an
pra
AoE attack.
poder
Obviously, you need to
ver
line
como
up your
validar a
enemies as opposed
ideia.
to having them all stand next to each
Você
other.
pode poluir
So we get a
placas
pretty
pra geral.
cool 1200
É,
range
tem isso,
beam
mano.
of ice that deals some damage and
Tomara
it also
que...
inflicts chill.
Tomara que fique
Honestly,
bem
nothing
feito,
too
né?
crazy, but a fairly potent skill. Then skill 3, we have access to Ripple. So this is going to be an evade. We talked a little bit. This is intended to be a little more of a glass cannon type weapon, but we still want to have a little bit of defense. We'll see the water and earth.
Evade
Three
framezinho.
skills provide a bit of defense to yourself. So this is obviously the evade.
É
And
cleanse
dash
também.
does some condition removal.
15 segundos de cooldown.
And the
Uma boa skill.
extra bonus here is that your next spear skill has cooldown, a lower cooldown. Then skill 4 is the inner circle
Pra caramba.
skill of its
De raridade também, sim.
attunement. I think this might be Taylor's favorite effect of all
literally
of them.
Like, oh my god, guys. Like, this
We
is
have-
crazy.
Undertow. So the idea is you create a whirlpool. Enemies in the center are pulled inwards, and everyone else is dealt a little bit of damage. But it also slows everyone that it strikes. So pretty powerful CC. You know, sets up for maybe the 5 skill, which forgive me ahead of time, because I will butcher this
Ah lá,
skill name.
a outra
but
skill.
big
Mano,
shout out
essas
to the
skills
editing team
5
for
da
including
lança ficaram.
my skill
Ficou legal a
name in
ideia,
the
hein?
game.
Você tem que
The
ficar
5
castando
skill
magia dentro do
on-
field, né?
The
E aí quando
water
você
skill
estaca, que eu
is
acho que
the
são
etching
5
of
magias,
Yokelhop,
você pode usar a skill
which
né,
is
de verdade.
a glacial
precisa,
flood specifically.
tipo,
So we'll see
fazer
some
a
watery
skill
stuff here,
ser
and we'll
castada.
see
Nossa,
some
é doideira isso,
ice
velho.
as well,
Doideira.
because it is a Yokelhop.
Buenas noites, sangue como meu querido.
We'll see here the
Salve, salve,
etching,
mano.
another sweet-looking spell circle. This one gives you personally a pulse healing. It's also
Boa
a water
sexta-feira
field, so
aí.
you can dash through it with Ripple, get a little bit more healing.
Vamos ver ela estourada, vamos ver se eles vão mostrar.
And then that'll flip over to the lesser Yokelhop, which is going
lá.
to fire off a
Ah, da hora. Mano,
icy
da
wave
hora os
at your
efeitos, velho.
enemies. It's going to heal you. First target struck will heal you a bit more, and the additional targets that you strike
Caralho.
will give you a lesser healing. Obviously, we can charge up this etching in the same way as the fire one and all the others.
Vocês viram o dano ali na de
Which
fogo?
is going to do a bit more
10k
damage,
de
and it's
dano
also
base,
going to have
filho.
increased healing numbers on there as well. And just for once again saying it, the full-powered version is, of course, just the Yokelhop. So I believe that's everything in the water attunement. I'm going to take a quick water break after that, but we will be moving into the air attunement next.
Mas
Masterful
permanece com estoque de
segue,
alimentos. Sim, acho que sim, Homer. Não reparei, pra falar a verdade. Vamos ver.
All right, hydrated. Now we are in the air attunement.
Deve fazer uns combinhos legais.
Kicking things off, again, the
Como
auto
só
attacks are all very
sim, dá.
straightforward. We
Pô,
have the
então,
lightning
GG,
javelin,
Vai ser interessante mesmo.
thematic skill name, but it does not interrupt attacking enemies like it does
Pareceu,
with
tá
Guild Wars 1,
parecendo forte também,
but
né?
it is
Como
a javelin
todas,
of lightning. So
todas
there
as
you have it.
outras classes.
Also inflicts vulnerability at enemies 1200
Ficaram
range
muito
away
bonitas as
from you.
skills, hein, mano. Muito foda.
Next up, we'll go into skill 2, another kind of ground-targeted AoE skill, this one called Fulgor. And the way that this skill works is it kind of... It's
Quem
similar
mais
to the
ganhou
Guardian
nessa
Binding
mudança foi o
Blade,
L, né?
where it is applying a damage
Ganhou
over
20
debuff
skill, né?
that's
Com a
scaled with
lança.
power.
20 skill
So
diferentes.
the idea is that
Todas
the
as outras
longer your
classes é
enemies
só 5
stand inside of
skillzinhas
this,
aí.
the more
Máximo 10.
each tick of the strike will inflict a couple seconds of this debuff. So it will stack up and up and up the longer
Achei
they
que o
stand
Weaver
into it,
tá roubadaço
and
pra
that will
VP.
follow,
E tem o Weaver, né?
maintain.
Que
We
ainda
see the
ganha
little
mais
lightning
skill
cloud
ainda
above the
nova.
golem that
Com
will stick
as
with you
mais
as
4,
it
né?
rains lightning down, even after the spell is done. That is, as long as the debuff is on you.
Não vi
Moving
no
on to skill
arqueiro.
3, we have Energize.
Foi a
This is an
primeira,
instant
o
skill.
Conde. Foi a primeira classe
Again,
que
more of that
mostrou.
utility focus. We just
Todas
get
as
super
skills da
speed,
lança
so
dão.
less of a immediately
Tem
powerful
stealth
mobility
attack.
skill as Ripple, but
Ficou interessante.
just a burst of super speed,
Com
and then
certeza
your
vai ser
next
pra
spear
usar
skill will
Smoke Scale,
always
né? Pra
critically
ficar
strike.
invisível e tal.
Again,
E
this
usar
applies
desses
to
Stealth
all
Attack.
strikes of the
Além
next
de que a
of the
lança
skill,
também te dá Stealth.
namely if Volcano is striking a bunch of times, all of those strikes will critically strike instead of just the next one.
Vamos pensar a pistola, que é toda clunk mesmo
Next
que
up,
no
skill
PV tem
4,
bons
we have the
números.
Twister. This is one that we saw in the
Sim.
preview video. Looks
As
super
3
cool
do
as
Weaver
well.
deixam o próximo
This
full
is the
elemento
inner
instacast,
circle
se não tô
skill of the
enganado.
air
Caralho,
attunement.
roubado.
Does some damage, does some vulnerability, and the inner circle here is going to be a float. Skill is also a blast finisher, so that's something that could come in handy. You know, if you're playing Catalyst, there are blast finishers, a few. You also have leaf finishers, a bunch of finishers on this kit, so that you can't get those triggers, get those extra. What's the trait called? Elemental Epitome triggers as needed. Then we have skill 5, the air etching, which is the derecho. This is a intense windstorm, you might say. But we'll see, this is going to pulse fury to yourself.
Lá, vamos ver a
and
skill
have the
5. A
similar
skill 5 tá fodona,
charging
hein?
up mechanic as all of the etchings have, and it'll allow you to throw out this pretty cool looking, you know, lightningy windstorm that is going to daze, deal some damage and daze enemies that it strikes. So obviously you initially start with lesser derecho, can power up to the full power derecho. I'm pretty sure I'm saying derecho correctly, but maybe the people in chat are just
Caralho, da
very
hora.
upset right now because I didn't practice it as much as I practiced saying yokel hop.
Eu não entendi nada como
But
funciona.
this effect is
Tipo,
super
você,
cool as well.
você vai
All the
castar
LE
esse
effects are
field
just
no
so
chão.
good. All the effects on all of them
Na hora
are
do
so
battle
good,
eu
but
vejo. Não, é simples,
I've seen
mano.
the LE
Você vai
ones
castar
probably
esse
the
field
most,
no
and
chão.
they're just like,
E aí você tem que ficar em cima
That's
dele
awesome.
jogando habilidade. Você tem que jogar 5 habilidades. Por isso que ele tá usando a skill do
I
Arcane
think
ali.
that's it
Que
for
daí
the
você já
air
joga as
attunement.
3 direto, como não tem cooldown, né? Na verdade
I'm
ele
gonna
tá
take another water
spamando
break,
ali pra
because why
poder
not?
mostrar pra gente. Ele usa 5 habilidades, aí você pode usar a skill
But then
empoderada.
we'll hop into Earth, and then don't worry, we still have the Weaver skills to talk about. So we still have plenty of time left on this stream to talk about the Elementalist Spear that is 1200 range. Can kick things off with the auto attack called Stone Strike. Nothing too crazy. You throw a spear, inflicts bleeding, does some damage. Skill 2 here is the Earthen Spear. It's just a much heavier, much more potent projectile attack that does significantly more damage than the auto attack. It's also projectile finisher and does a pretty significant cripple here. So, you know, we talked about it, this weapon being a bit of a glass cannon. We do see like the survivability aspects are going to be some of that. You have the dash and water, but it's going to be a lot of soft crowd control and hard crowd control, where it's going to be more positioning based. If someone is attacking you like right next to you, you may want to CC them and then like swap to air, get the super speed, run away type of things. It's
Não
less
lembro se
hard
alguma das
mitigation
outras
because we
classes
do
tinham
want this to
medidas de
feel
range.
like that
Eu acho
glass
que não,
cannon,
acho que não.
long range,
Nossa, vai dar pra fazer
1200
cosplay
range,
de Nidali.
big AoE
Sim.
damage, but
True.
you know, not a ton of survivability. Enough survivability that you don't just fall over if someone sneezes on you, but it's not going to feel as tanky as some other.
Pô, 1600 de dano base não é pouco não, hein?
But one of the skills
Só que é
that
6
is
segundos de
defensive
cooldown
here,
também, então
skill
tá mais
3
de
in the Earth
boa.
Attunement is Harden. We talked about this in the blog. This is just going to give you a personal barrier and make your next spear strike, inflict, daze. So this can be obviously any of your
São
skills.
todas,
The
né,
auto
de
attack will daze, the two skill will
1200.
daze. Any spear skill will
É,
daze
do
as
L
long as you
parece
have
que
this
é.
harden buff on you. We've seen a lot of these
Eu
three
achei
skills
que
are also
fosse
very
menos
quick
range,
casting.
mano.
That plays in very
1200 é
nicely
roubado,
with
hein?
the charging up of the etching as well. Then moving into skill 4, we
Vai
have
ter
the
spec
fissure.
nova? Não, Léo. Não.
This is the inner circle
Só arma.
mechanic here. Kind of similar to the fire one. This
A
skill
arma
does
e
a
o
little bit less
housing, né?
damage overall, but it gets a
E os
damage increase
conteúdos
in
aí
the
de
inner
história
circle, but
também.
also weakness. So a little bit more of that debilitating. We get some cripple on here,
Essa
get some
skill
extra
ficou bonita
weakness in
também.
there, and deal some damage. As long as you're aiming this properly. Should be fairly potent. More of like a disruptive, debilitating skill, more so than a
Tá roubadinho,
pure
por isso
damage
eu nem
skill. But it
perguntei
still
se ia
probably does a
liberar pra
ton of
todo mundo.
damage. And
Não, vai
some game modes
nada.
where it needs to.
Não quiser comprar, sei que se ferre.
And then finally, we have the final etching here in
E eu tô
Earth Attunement,
ferrado.
the etching of a haboob.
Ah,
This is a devastating dust storm.
Sorry, what's it
you
called
might
again?
o
say.
último.
It is the
Olha, o
haboob.
Element vai ganhar um Dark Field,
And
guys.
for
Primeira vez que
anyone
ele vai
who
ter
is
Dark Field.
unfamiliar, this is a very specific type of dust storm that it actually, the effect, it definitely does it justice, and in a way that doesn't make the game collapse. There was an initial concern here with because anyone who's not heard of the word before, a hoob, it's like you should look it up online because it's like this kind of this oozing wall of dust that just like consumes everything, and that's actually not great to put in the game. But the art team crushed it, and we found a way to really get the feeling of that without making everyone's FPS drop to 0 and make the server fall
Essa
over.
ficou mais bostinha, né?
But here we'll see the haboob, the etching of the haboob while you're standing in it is going to give you personally stability, no one else.
Haboob, o
And
nome
then
da,
as you charge
da
it up,
skill.
we'll see that the greater version will do more damage, but the other aspect of this is that
Por isso você
as
logo
you
quando você
charge
for
it up,
comprar.
the lesser version is going to
Tá
do
certo, aí sim.
a couple of conditions. We see cripple and blind on there, but once you get up to the fully charged haboob, that is going to do cripple, blind. I think I already forgot all of them. Let me just press it on my own screen. Cripple, blind, weakness, and vulnerability, in addition to doing a bit more damage. And you can just see the haboob oozing over the screen and striking enemies in its path.
Roubado, acabou?
I'm gonna
Ah, vai mostrar do
Please
Weaver
set up.
agora, guys.
Also, again, big shout out to the editing team for going with my skill names because I'm pretty excited about them.
O dia do Mesmer tá como? O Mesmer tá melee.
Let me swatch Weir on my own screen too,
Mas
so
os
I can
números
actually
parece que
follow
tá bom
along.
também. Parece
We're
que não
gonna
tá
try
fraco,
to
não.
maintain synchronization between the two of us as we talk about different skills.
Gami,
So where are we starting? Fire, water?
Fire, water.
Bom demais.
Alright. So fire, water. There's actually a kind of a shared mechanic to the Weaver skills as well. We're going to see here that they're in a similar vein to the Ore skills, where they're kind of more utility focused, and then there's a second bonus effect. So the
Após que
Frost Fire
terminar lendário
Ward
de
is the
nível,
Fire Water dual attack. It's going
sexta
to give
que
you
vem.
both
Aí
Fire
sim,
Aura and
Homerzado.
Frost Aura. Pretty cool.
Aí
But then
sim.
the thing that all of
Uma
the dual
semana
skills
só.
do is that they are going to fully recharge the cooldown of your primary attunement. So obviously, as a Weaver, you typically have those longer cooldowns as you swap between elements. It puts all your skills on cooldown, all your attunements on cooldown, so you can't immediately swap into the dual attune state. But with these dual skills, you'll kind of have that flexibility. If you swap into Fire Water, use Frost Fire Ward, you can then immediately go into Fire Fire if you want to. So it's like, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty, like, it gives you a lot of room. It's going to be interesting to see how you play around this, right? Because as you have the offhand attunement, you have like that etching available, but then you can also, if you've already used that etching, maybe you just immediately use the dual skill and then swap it to your fire state and then start from like that etching. There's a lot of flexibility here that these give access to, and obviously they're all like instant low cast skills as well because they will charge up your etchings. So we felt that this was a really cool mechanic to give to Weaver because it kind of shakes up how their
Roubado, hein?
existing gameplay works while also playing into the spear weapon mechanics. So we'll see how it plays. I think it's pretty cool, and we're hoping that it makes it feel pretty clean and fluid to play. And then there's also these other effects that are tied to the skills. So we see fire or
Ou então
frost
se a
aura.
gente Element.
So where are we going
Sim,
next?
vai dar pra usar aquelas
Fire, air?
duas
Fire,
vezes
air,
seguidas,
yeah.
pô.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Roubado, haja dedo.
So
Pois
fire,
é,
air,
pois
we
é.
have galvanize.
Mano,
So
roubado,
the idea
velho.
is that there's kind of like the two small utility pieces, one from each attunement, is what makes up each of these skills. So we saw the fire aura and the frost aura. Here we're getting some might, which is thematically fire. You're also getting some super speed, thematically air, and again recharging the cooldown of your primary attunement. So next, let's go fire earth, shall we? We have the fiery impact.
É,
This
não
is going to grant
parece
you
que
stability.
tipo
It's
assim,
also going to be a blast
eles
finisher.
deram esse
So
efeito
obviously
roubado,
earth
né,
and
de
fire.
poder atunar
And then
rápido
again,
pra
reduce the cooldown of your
pro
primary
elemento
achievement.
que você já
So
tá
all of these
atunado,
are fairly utility focused, pretty
mas
simple
não,
things,
não dá quase
but they
nada de
are
efeito, né, em
playing
si as
into
skills.
the underlying mechanic of the spear,
São
which I
bem
think brings a
fraquinha.
lot of
Então é mais
value to them.
pela questão de você
And
poder
obviously, the
atunar
effects are not
rápido
trivial too. Like getting stability
pra
is good, getting
outro,
crossbow
pro
fire is
elemento que
good.
você já
They're
tá, né?
obviously not like crazy damage skills, but they are like useful utility skills that
Salve então,
are
boa noite,
almost
pô.
free
Salve,
because you
salve,
can
Indião,
just
meu
swap
querido.
into
Boa
your
noite,
dual
mano.
ultimate, have your other 3 skill if you need it. We still have 3 more to go. Let's go to water, air next. And this skill is called Elutriate.
Ah lá, é tipo uns efeitinhos meio
This
bosta, né?
removes
Meio
2
bunda.
conditions, 1 damaging condition
conde
and 1
cleanse.
non-damaging condition from yourself.
O outro dá
so obviously
ou dois
we get
stabs,
some
sei
of that.
lá.
Okay. More of the non-damaging from air is the
É só
thematic
pra você
here,
poder
and the
resetar
damaging from
rápido
water.
seus
You'll be
attunements.
potentially cleansing 2 conditions while also reducing the recharge of your primary
Nó,
achievement.
Elementalist vai virar
So
mais
you can
tocador de
continue to
piano,
unleash
então
your
quem
12
joga de
range
Weaver vai
skills
ser agora.
on your
O
enemies.
Weaver lança vai ser o tocador de piano.
And up we can talk about water earth, which is the soothing burst. This will heal you while also being a blast finisher.
Ganhando os bônus,
So again,
bonuzinho
some
do
of these
meio.
blasts are really cool
Vai
with
com stab super speed.
you know,
É, então.
maybe primarily the
É só-
water etching
é mais
as
a
it heals
questão
you,
de
but you can also
resetar
get some
mesmo, né?
might, you can get some swiftness, maybe a little bit less exciting, but blast finishers. Obviously recharges the
Se
primary
tu
achievement.
tocar o piano e me
And
acertar
last
vai.
up we have the
Pois é, vamos ver as
Storm
builds, né?
in
Vamos ver como é
air
que vai ficar
earth.
essas builds aí.
This is a very short duration.
Pô, mas eu consigo fazer uma
projectile
core
hate skill.
funcionar, viu?
So
Me
it
dá
is actually
me dá essa expansão aí pra você ver se eu não
very,
faço uma
very powerful
corzada
effect,
Spear
but it is
funcionar.
only a 3-second duration here. We'll be keeping a pretty close eye on this because it is again
Mas o
fairly
Weaver vai
free,
ser tocador de
making
piano
sure the
mesmo, mano.
cooldown and the duration lines up. But this is like supposed to be more of that defensive
Pior apertar 8000 botões e não
utility
fazer
focused
nada.
skill. Thematically, both air and earth have the projectile hate, so it felt natural to do like this one thing as the dual
Bonito
attunement,
ser feito, sim, sim.
and that is the last
Tá bonita
skill
as skills, mano.
on the
Todas as
elementalist
skills.
spear, which is a 1200 range, long range, glass cannon, AoE DPS weapon.
Pedra
I
rodopiante
think we got
melhor
it
até
all.
agora.
I
Did we
think
miss anything?
Pô, gostei muito do
I think
vulcão
we
de
hit
fogo ali
everything,
também.
even
O
like
vulcão de
ambushes.
fogo ali, a skill 5 do fogo ficou massa, hein?
for every class. That is
Bem
all.
massa.
Wow, first time for everything.
Quero ver as builds of meta.
Yes, so we're gonna wrap up now. How about you start the wrap up, Taylor? Because I just talked for a long
Acabou,
period of
né?
time.
Acabou, guys.
Dope past beta with where they really fantastic.
Still being worked on. We did use some of the off the top of my. I love working here. I love the team that we work with, the teams that we get to work with.
Bom,